We're joined now by the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, Executive Secretary Lawson Naidoo. Lawson, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. This is a man who brought the human touch to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. We saw a lot of that as he spoke during his farewell dinner last night, marking his departure from the Constitutional Court. As we take stock of his judicial contribution, what's your reflection of his roles and tenure?
Well, I think we have to pay tribute firstly to the long service that the outgoing Chief Justice has given to South Africa as a public servant, as a judge for 27 years. And of course, he'll be remembered probably best as for his role as the chairperson of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, perhaps even more so than his official title as Chief Justice of the Republic, as the head of the judicial arm. And I think in the last few years in particular, he's come to be a person that we've grown accustomed to seeing on our television screens, that brought the humility to the proceedings of the State Capture Commission, and has brought an element of that integrity to the judiciary as a whole. So I think he leaves on a high note, but he's left in his wake a lot of work that still needs to be done to really enhance the independence of the judiciary, to enhance respect for the rule of law. And that's work that is not just left to the judiciary, but to all of us as South Africans.
As you talk about that, I know that last year you'd expressed concerns over Zondo's remarks. In fact, you castigated him for comments over former President Jacob Zuma's arms deal trial and state capture proposals. I suppose it was a reflection of the fine line between politics and the law. Would you say that it's worth crediting Zondo for using his public image to speak out in defense of the judiciary?
Well, I think one can understand in many respects why he spoke out on some of those issues that perhaps with the benefit of hindsight he might think differently now. But given that he had invested 4 years of his life looking into the detail of the allegations of state capture, the particular role that the former President Zuma played in that saga, the fact that Mr. Zuma failed to appear before the Commission of Inquiry to give evidence, his frustration was understandable. But, in his role as Chief Justice, there was a fine line, and on occasion, I think he may have crossed that line.
So the outgoing Chief Justice has now warned that state capture will return. I mean, he said it many times, but he said it again today, that if there are no mechanisms in place, as he spoke during a special ceremonial sitting at the Constitutional Court, yet a lot of emphasis in the farewell messages for the Chief Justice have been on assuring him that the state capture report will be implemented, those recommendations. Last night, it was Justice Minister Thembi Simelane speaking on behalf of the President. This morning, it was Shamila Batohi, whose NPA has really come under sharp criticism for dragging its feet in prosecuting cases. How should we interpret these assurances at this time? Isn't this work law enforcement should be engaging as a matter of course anyway?
Indeed, I think, firstly, if we look back at what the outgoing Chief Justice said, this is something he said ever since he produced his final report, 2 years ago and handed it over to President Ramaphosa. And many of the recommendations in the State Capture Commission's reports were aimed at, not just at looking at issues of law enforcement and further investigations of particular individuals and entities, but really, future-proofing our institutions of governance. You played a clip earlier of the Speaker of the National Assembly, committing to taking the report seriously. But in the 2 years since that report was released, we've seen very little action, both on the front of law enforcement in terms of investigations and more particularly prosecutions, and indeed successful prosecutions for state capture misdemeanors. But we've also seen very little progress in terms of implementation of some of the other recommendations, the systemic recommendations, for example, enhanced protection for whistleblowers, ensuring that that Parliament adopts proper mechanisms to hold the executive to account. Those have been slow in the making, and I think, to a certain extent, Raymond Zondo was speaking about his frustrations that the recommendations have not been dealt with the urgency that he and I suppose many South Africans hoped that they would have been.
Yeah, I mean, earlier this year we heard that Parliament doesn't even have any money to implement the state capture recommendations. What should we make of these assurances, having known and heard, I think from as early as March already, that there is no budget for this?
Well, I don't think that's really the case. I don't think that it's really a question of budget for Parliament. It's more a question of political will, using the structures of Parliament to act more effectively, giving parliamentary committees, the full mandate to investigate matters, to question members of the executive and state-owned entities with regards to issues that might arise within their various departments and jurisdictions. So, it's not always a question of money. Oftentimes it is, particularly when it comes to law enforcement side of things, in terms of capacity of investigations and prosecutors. But I think what we really want to see, and it was pleasing to hear the words of the Speaker of the National Assembly, that there will be a commitment under the 7th Parliament to pursue those recommendations, take them seriously, and put in place the mechanisms that can really ensure that there's more effective oversight than we've seen in the past.
What about his successor and current Deputy Chief Justice Mandisa Maya? I mean, she said that Zondo's departure will leave a huge void in the judiciary. What kind of foundation do you think Zondo's laid for the incoming Chief Justice?
Well, I think he's restored an element of respect for the judiciary in the short time that he's been there. I mean, we must recognize that his tenure as Chief Justice was pretty short, just around 2.5 years. Yeah. But he's made some progress. A lot more needs to be done in terms of restoring confidence in the judiciary. Steps he has taken in terms of seeking to ensure that there's further independence of the judiciary from an operational point of view, in terms of taking charge of the facilities that judges operate under within courts, the IT systems that are needed in order to enhance the efficiency of the courts, the fact that we need more judges in our courts to be able to dispense justice more speedily. But there are many challenges that remain in terms of many delayed judgments from the various courts, in particular the high courts, but also the SCA and the Constitutional Court itself. But also there's a lot of work that still remains to be done in terms of the functioning of the Judicial Service Commission, which the incoming Chief Justice will now chair. And again, there's been some progress in the last few years with Zondo at the helm, but there's an awful lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that the best caliber of candidates put up their hands for appointment to the bench, and that the Judicial Service Commission exercises its functions in a way that enhances confidence in the caliber of people appointed there. Yeah. And again, the results that Raymond Zondo leaves behind, whilst on the whole can be ascribed as being positive, there was an instance last year when the JSC failed to fill all of the vacancies in the Supreme Court of Appeal, again had to be taken into court in order to force them to do what is their constitutional duty.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion. Counsel for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, Executive Secretary Lawson Naidoo, speaking there about outgoing Chief Justice Raymond Zondo.